Hi, and welcome to another episode of Silver Goose Farm Stories. I'm your host, Mama Goose. I think most of us are pretty familiar with the phrase, it takes a village, or, the idea that we as individuals or single family units aren't insular, aren't alone, and a lot of the big things that we have to accomplish in life are done by working together with other people. Living this farm life, it's entirely possible to become isolated physically because we're here in the middle of acreage. We are in the foothills about an hour away from the nearest big city, and it is entirely possible to go days, if not weeks, without seeing other people or going anywhere. And there are times when I feel like doing just that, fully embracing that bucolic hermit lifestyle because there's work to be done, and I kind of resent anything that interrupts the plans on the farm. I've left behind that FOMO, that fear of missing out feeling in my 20s, and in my 30s moving forward, I fully intend to embrace the leave me alone so I can be with my garden ideal completely. However, this really isn't a realistic lifestyle because as much as I want to embrace the shut-in game and hide away in my bedroom at cave, especially now that the temperatures in the daytime are 90 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing, that's not a good attitude to have for my children. We're homeschooling or homesteading, so we take every opportunity we can to spend time with people and develop, that social side of their lives. And then there's the other side of homesteading, the fact that the to-do list on the farm is like a completely independent entity of itself. It is constantly growing and fluctuating. It's this, I consider it to be like this living, breathing creature that is literally hanging over me as the one who has created it and brought it to life in the first place. And as I've mentioned many times, even if you're consistent and diligent about going through the tasks on said list, it can grow at a much faster rate than it shrinks, especially if you have larger, more complicated projects on it. Sometimes it'll take weeks, if not months, to cross off a line item. Like on our list currently, the top item is to finish the solar and re-roof the house and put in the screen porch and the outdoor kitchen. None of those are simple one-day tasks. And then it gets really easy to feel discouraged or burned out or fall into a pattern of procrastination or get distracted by the other smaller, minor tasks that kind of come up unexpectedly. And sometimes that to-do list can become something that's more of a burden than an inspiration. And that's never a fun feeling to have. Have you ever watched a video of one of those Amish barn raisings? It's so fascinating to watch this huge, beautiful, usable structure come together and be finished within a day or two. And that's completely because the entire community comes together to get the work done. We are very blessed to be part of an amazing community of friends. The fact that it took me moving out of the city with people literally feet away from my window to the farm where my closest neighbors can't even see my house, for me to develop this social life and this very close-knit community always amuses me. And the friendships that we have made are strong and true because we share the same family goals, the farm goals, and we share the same faith. I'd like to put in the Sidebar to clarify that we did have friends when we lived in the city. They just weren't our neighbors or people like in our direct neighborhood, but friends that we have made with the connections throughout our lives. So we all kind of have the same issue of tackling the task list beast with varying levels of success. There are always limitations of time, of money, of manpower and tools, of health and skill and knowledge, and sometimes just the sheer magnitude of the projects at hand. So we've been trying to channel a bit more of Amishness in the fact that instead of attempting to do the big projects on our own, because then we'll never get to them, we save them for a community workday. We've already been doing that for butchering days, dividing up the labor, dividing up the meat, and getting together over shared meal, or on smaller scale or emergency type projects that need an extra pair of hands. But now we're trying to be more intentional on the planning. So this month was the Silva workday, and next month will be another family's workday, and everyone marks it on their calendars. It does a number of things, which I really appreciated. It forces the hosting family to be prepared. Number one, you have to have a project that has materials or game plan ready for when all hands are on deck. This is good for my husband and me because we're kind of slow to get started on the day-to-day things. We talk and we make lists and we gather materials and we have to feed all the kids, but it all kind of happens without a sense of urgency because we're just doing it at our own pace. Unless, of course, I'm having some sort of scheduling panic attack, in which case my husband will really slow down to counterbalance me. But if we know there'll be a caravan of people ready and willing to work and we're on some sort of schedule, then we have to move and be prepared for them, to make the best use of whatever they're bringing to the table. So our first workday was this past weekend. We started with a relatively simple task, I guess, on paper, but it was to take down the big rotting oak tree outside of Hank's and my bedroom window. Hank had taken it down as far as he could by himself, and so most of the dangerous limbs that were weighing the trunk towards our house had been taken off, but it was still this massive trunk that was left behind that could still come crashing through our roof in the next big storm. Plus, there was the giant pile of huge branches and brush that had been cut and needed to be stacked and split and moved out of the way from right outside of our house. Because if you have that much brush close to a residential area, you're just asking for snakes to come. And also, we couldn't mow around it or keep the grass short because of all of the obstacles, and that's a wildfire hazard. So our friends arrived with all sorts of chainsaws and weed eaters and even a skid steer tractor towed on a trailer, and the dads were just kind of immediately out sawing and cutting and moving rounds of wood while the kids ran amok as they do, stopping in to hydrate and snack and move the chaos along. My friend and I had dinner going in the kitchen and the grill, because not only did our friends bring their tools and their labor, they also brought dinner, which was fabulous. In 1/2 day of work, the tree and all its debris got cleared. An amount of work that would have taken Hank a month of weekends solely dedicated to clearing the tree. And the big climax of the day was when the remaining trunk got pulled down by a truck and tether line and combination of chainsawing. So all the children were lined up in front of our house to watch, and us moms were on the front step, slowly realizing that if the tether line snapped, the trunk could swing back and crush us all. But no one seemed to be particularly concerned, actually. But thankfully, that didn't happen. We're still alive, and the trunk came down just as planned. Thank God. The tree just shattered as it hit the ground. And the top half had been absorbing all of the winter rain and just had retained that moisture. And when it hit the ground, it like gushed out in this like mix of sap, water, and fermented wood mash. And it was this like reddish brown color. And all the kids just started screaming, "Blood! You killed the tree is bleeding." And, actually for a minute I was kind of perplexed, like, is the tree bleeding? Like, that's kind of horrifying. But, it smelled like fermented wood, so it wasn't blood, thankfully. The kids also, like, immediately ran up to climb on top of the trunk, and they discovered a nest of woodpeckers that had been inside the trunk. So all of the kids, like, reached in and grabbed a bunch of stunned woodpeckers and moved them to a different tree. And, that was a great deal of excitement for one day. And as the work kind of wound down, we all came inside and prepared to feast. And what a feast. My favorite type of meal is a potluck dinner because it's just everybody sharing dishes around a table, and a meal eaten after a hard day's work is particularly satisfying. And the talk around the table was just how like excited everyone was to get such a big task finished in such a short amount of time, and trying to think of dates and putting down the next work day, to plan ahead. Admittedly, the next day, my husband was pretty sore, because another thing that happens when you're working alongside other people is that you keep up a pace that you normally wouldn't on your own. If someone is still going when you're kind of petering out, like, you have that extra incentive to work a little bit harder yourself that you can't necessarily do when you're alone in the blazing sun. Looking back at the now empty hillside in front of our house, our friend sort of congratulated everybody, like patting them on the shoulder, and then he made this remark, like, that would be a great spot for some grapevines. And I was so excited. I was like, that's a great idea, Hank. Doesn't that sound like an amazing idea? And he just sort of looked at me with a face, because guess who's going to be digging the holes for those grapevines? But yeah, it was one successful workday under our belts. I really look forward to being able to return the favor to our friends next month. I keep saying we, but it's just going to be my husband, because at that point I'll be either very, very pregnant or have a newborn. So not much help, but probably a lot of cute babies to be passed around. So I hope you'll be along for the ride, and I hope that I'll be able to share what that next workday looks like with all of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast. We always appreciate when you take the time to stop and listen. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop us a line on our website at silvergoosefamilyfarm.com, or you can check out what else is going on at the farm on our Instagram, same handle, Silver Goose Family Farm. Thank you again, and I hope to talk to you very soon. Bye!